and guests. It's a great honor to be part of this ChildGauge, and I was very touched by the earlier comments about our friend and comrade David Saunders, who played such an important role in many other ChildGauges in the past. The ChildGauge is an exemplary science communication. It brings together the rigor of research, but tries to put it in a way that it is accessible to the broader community and also that is directed towards policymakers. As an example of science communication, it means that it needs the rigor of good methodology, the power of good data, data which in most instances has been published, has been through peer review, and finally the conceptual rigor that allows us to structure meaningful arguments. So the ChildGauge is always informed by a solid theoretical base, and this ChildGauge on child malnutrition is no different. I'm going to talk very briefly to 5 important concepts that inform this ChildGauge and end my short input with the 3 things that we're asking for. My colleagues then will take you through the data that we have assembled with a significantly large research team that comes from all parts of South Africa and includes researchers from France and from the USA and from the UK, so a very wide range of people have made input into this ChildGauge. So the concepts which I'd like to put forward. You've heard frequently us talk about food security or food and nutrition security. Food and nutrition security is a well-defined concept. It will be debated at the UN Food Summit that will take place in September this year, and it comprises issues of availability. Do we produce enough food? Accessibility, can people afford it? Can they source it? The utilization, what they do with the food once they've purchased it. Is the food supply and food prices stable? And what are people's agency? How can people themselves take control of the food systems within which they engage? Obviously, all of these dimensions have been significantly impacted by COVID. At one point, it was difficult to leave our homes to buy food. It was difficult for the retailers to be able to sell us food. We've already heard the mentions of the prices that have gone up. We know that people had to utilize food in different ways in order to make it stretch. We've seen variations in how food has been supplied in different areas, and we know that people have had to engage with the food system to the point of protesting when food is not available. So that's the first concept. The second that we've referred to often already in this presentation is malnutrition as a double burden. This is when we recognize that malnutrition is both undernutrition, not getting enough to eat, not getting enough calories, and critically not getting enough micronutrients, as well as overnutrition, when people are consuming foods which contain nothing more than empty calories. The result is this is food that causes people to become overweight and obesity and obese, and is not a sign of wealth, but a sign of poverty. Those are the foods that tend to be more affordable and more available, while healthy food tends to be more expensive. The next comment that has come up frequently, child malnutrition as slow violence. This concept of slow violence has been introduced to us from researchers working in climate change, who talk about the slow violence of climate change, something that is hidden, that is slow, and that is dramatically changing our world. It's been introduced into the analysis of child malnutrition because that too is a form of slow violence. Let's just take one example. Stunting is one outcome, one very visible outcome of child malnutrition. It refers to children having a low height for age and is a signal of chronic malnutrition. But underlying that are far more severe effects. Issues of how the child physically develops, how the immune system of the child develops, its motor system, and its cognitive system. All of those are compromised when a child experiences a severe nutritional shock. Those also predispose a child to becoming overweight and obese in adolescence and as an adult, and that in turn predisposes the adult to be at higher risk of non-communicable disease, diabetes, hypertension, as well as disorders that are musculoskeletal, the actual changes in the body and the muscles due to being overweight. All of that tends to be referred to sometimes as South Africa having children that are short and fat. This further stigmatizes the situation of children that have experienced malnutrition, because it is a lot more than being short and fat. It is a compromised health system. The next concept that we've used is a life course as a way of identifying the drivers, the impact, as well as opportunities to address malnutrition. So we have opportunities throughout the child's life, from its the time that it is a fetus to the time that it is beginning to graduate into adulthood. All of these are moments when we can do something. And lastly, what can we do? We're talking about the idea of double duties, where we're able to take policies and use these to address both forms of malnutrition, under and over malnutrition, as well as be able to think about how we can address other kinds of issues raised in the food system, as defined earlier by our colleague from UNICEF, and simultaneously address goals of malnutrition. So what are we asking for? And I'll stop in a minute and allow my colleagues to take over. We're asking for three things which we think can make a huge difference. The first is to increase the child support grant, at least to the food poverty line. This would make a tremendous difference. The evidence shows very clearly that increasing incomes will have an impact upon child's nutritional status. The second is to implement the Food Council as it is envisaged by our National Food Security Plan. That is the Food Council that is multi-sectoral, that bridges different government departments as well as different sectors, private, public, and civil society. And critically, we would like that Food Council to include someone who has a child-centered approach. And lastly, we would like to see a roadmap developed by government, a roadmap towards how we will achieve the obligations that we have as a country in our constitution, particularly in section 28(1) C and D. Colleagues, I'll now hand over to the two co-editors. Thank you.